Okay, we're going to pick it up right where we left off. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me. This is Lack of Lepers. We are responding to Dr. Gears of the SCP Wiki Foundation, the SCP Foundation Wiki, and this is him in an interview on the Creative Stuff podcast.
Problems you think are with that are on the wiki or the community in general?
Gotta get that content in. Gotta get that clickbait in.
Oh yeah,
oh, yeah. You gotta get that dirty shit. You gotta have some kind of smut in there.
So, what are the problems? Well, here's the thing. I'll put you right up front.
I'm gonna pause this because I hope that he talks about the ego and the rating module. Ego is really kind of self-explanatory. I would love to hear his commentary on the rating module. I would love it. Something that really has no power on its own, but that has been just imbued with such a devilish spirit, on the site. I mean, it has become something alive. It is, just an absolute monster that these people, really, it's the result of their own machinations. So I do hope he says that. I know he's going to say ego. I know he's going to say rating module. I just hope he focuses on the second one.
Okay. I am not as active in the community as I was.
But, there are some parts about being somewhat removed from the community that gives you an observational advantage. It's true that some things you can only really glean from that intimate, up-close, experiential sort of, experience of the actual site. But there are also some things that you completely miss because your nose is just pressed so close to the canvas that the bigger picture, you can see the colors and shapes, and you might know the details of their, tracings a little more granulated, a little more granular of a picture than if you were further away. But you miss the big picture. Your nose is pressed so close to the canvas. So, Dr. Gears, I think, is just on a wonderful perch in sort of a parallel run to the community, and I'm very interested to hear what he has gleaned from that. So this whole downplaying yourself as not being part of the community caveat, like, okay, that's true, that's fair, but come on, man. You have a unique vantage point, and that's what we're interested in.
So I don't know everything that's going on. I don't always know everything.
Thank God. You don't want to know everything that's going on. Look, get off of SCP Twitter. I mean, God, what a trash fire. It's just a giant cadaver that's just preserved in all kinds of horrible chemicals. That's what SCP Twitter is. So, I mean, you need to zoom out so that these sorts of small, pieces of just absolute, petty drama are just factored out, at that scale. They're just truncated out. That's where you need to be.
I'm getting back into it a bit.
And the big ones, the real meaningful ones, if they happen at all, they'll rise to that scale.
More, so I'm a little bit more aware of it, and sometimes people come to me like, "Oh my God, this is going on." I'm like, I don't know who that is, and they'll be like, "This is going on." It's like, wow, that sounds really bad.
Yep.
Okay. That's unfortunate.
Interesting.
But some of the problems.
Very
okay,
interesting.
Let me tell you what's up. Let me learn you something.
Come on.
This is an online community. Okay. Online communities, I don't know why. I'm sure there's studies. I'm sure there's a process that says this. Tends to attract certain personalities. And I think it's not even necessarily online communities. I think it's just small communities. You're going to get people who are going to get a little too big for their britches. They're going to get a little prima donna thing going on. And
who do you think he's talking about? This is partially why I give Cactus some credit, but also at the same time I'm like, are you just up to your old ways? Because when you have someone like this, Dr. Gears, I mean, he's saying it without saying it. He's showing you and not telling you. I mean, we all know who he's talking about, and if you're getting called out by me, little old me, that's one thing, right? You can dismiss what I've been saying for several years as nonsense, as pseudo-intellectual crap, and then years down the line agree with it, but obviously no one remembers or pays attention to that, or knows that you've essentially agreed with me just years later. But when someone like Dr. Gears says this, and it's in a public place like this, especially if you're of a politician's mindset, you're going to change your tune. You have to. It's damage control by that point. It's brand salvaging. It's stock buoyancy at that point. You're in a corner at that point. When Dr. Gears is saying that about you, when you're that attached to the community that regards his words as, sacrosanct in some ways, you're going to have to do that. I don't have that onus. I don't have that burden. I'm not expected to be liked by anybody. I certainly don't put a lot of stock in my own stock, so to speak, socially. So, I don't have that problem. That's nice. That's a pleasantry from where I sit. But if you're Cactus, who he is talking about here, primarily, and stuff like this is gonna you're gonna want to front run it. You want to gonna get out ahead of it. That's just political 101.
I think that because blank, maybe they did something big, maybe they wrote something good, maybe they
think they're better than they are.
Were a part of something important. They're more important than everyone else.
See, and once again, I'm going to say this over and over. Nobody has the right to claim that more than Dr. Gears. No one. In my opinion, you can only put Dr. Gears as anything but number one if you want to look at upvotes, which is very telling as to why upvotes have become very, certain people's preferred way of measuring value in this community and on the site particularly. It's the only way that anybody surpasses Dr. Gears, period. And yet, Dr. Gears doesn't have this problem. Why is that? Well, he's a little older. He's a little wiser. But there's more to it than that. You don't have to be old and wise to have access to this sort of maturity and discipline. In fact, it's very rudimentary.
And that's not how it works. And that's where you're going to run into issues. And that's not even just the site. That's anything, any kind of group.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had it happen. I've been in the middle of shit like that before, back in the old days, of people having ego attacks and freaking out.
Yep.
It's a problem. Generally best to nip in the bud, but you're always going to get people mouthing off, and that can become a problem, especially in the interconnectedness of today. Definitely want to deal with that as much as you can. You get people who, try and make it their own way. They have a vision for
visionary,
the foundation, and the one truth, TM. And man, if you don't follow it, they'll make your life real hard. And it's people who get outside of the foundation. People who try to, because we're all, writers or consumers or various combinations thereof. And that's how it should stay. It's, if you want to critique someone's work, fantastic. If it makes you feel a strong emotion, let them know. If you can swear as little as possible, all the better. But it's when you get people leaning on other people to try and influence them one way or another. That shit is bad. And when you get the same thing, where people trying to drum up votes or feedback or perception for something that doesn't deserve it. I feel, tell people like, hey, I wrote this, come check it out. Hey, come look at this. Can you look at this?
This is one of my favorite things that he has to say, just in general.
And
yeah, I'm really, that really hit me, what he just said. Because I have to think, because I'm a thinking person. I like to be introspective. So now I have to think, what I do, on my blog, is that leaning into people in the way that he's talking about? Is that unhealthy for the community as well? Well, probably. Maybe it's a little like anti-venom. Maybe it's a little like chemotherapy. It's not pretty. It's not pleasant. But at some point, the severity of the pathophysiology might necessitate it, or surgery, for example, if we want to go there. I mean, surgery is not Surgery is a very violent thing. If you've ever been in an OR, particularly orthopedic, it looks a lot like a tool workshop. It looks a lot like a garage, or some sort of like industrial floor, So I mean the equal and opposite reactions are just as ugly, in a lot of ways, and I think that's what he's saying, which is totally true. But they're equal and opposite reactions for a reason. A great example is something he kind of talked about, which is criticism of people's articles. When you get the state of SCP now, where, it's not to say that criticism is dead. You can go to several articles and you'll see, particularly active writers still do this but they'll say what they think about an article, no problem. But a lot of it, an increasing number of it, is just the most vacuous, lifted straight from social media comments like, milk +1, just completely vacuous things. And so, and on top of that, you have a culture of people who feel as though, going back to what he said, they have a privilege, a social privilege, and it is their privilege to not be the recipient of any criticism like that, of any real criticism. And so when you have people pushing that agenda, for their own emotional, the security of their ego, I think you're going to get the equal and opposite reaction as a matter of you can call it justice, you can call it equilibrium, but yeah, I mean, look, what I do, the things I say, they're acidic, they're venomous, they have the potential to shake people and injure their egos. That's really the whole point. So is it dirty work? Yes. Am I a villain? I don't think so. I think there are just as villainous things happening on the other side of the coin in the SCP Wiki. I think that the sort of efforts that people like me are involved in are necessary at this point. I think that everybody, maybe actually not the people who we're arguing against, but certainly me and people who are on my side, we would rather not exist in this way. We'd rather the problems be gone and our commentary on them as well.
If they like it or they don't, fantastic. And that should be the end of it. That should be the absolute end of it.
This is one of my favorite things. Because, once again, you have things going on today where it's like, if you criticize an article, go out of your way to criticize an article, let's say on a Twitter account, people they'll try to tell you that you're a bad person.
It is a problem. You get people, chasing votes.
Yep.
You get people...
Rounder House. I mean, I think it's in a staff chat quote, but it's in, no, here's what it is. It's in Rajit Box. This was an old chat that cool kids used to hang out in. And Rounder was there one day, and he said, basically reduced SCPD to a fertile farmland for upvotes and clout chasing, and he said that's really how he got his momentum as an author.
Up stuff.
And he was probably being instructed by DJ Cactus, because we all know that he's sort of the protege of DJ Cactus and a disciple of his thinking.
It's one of the things, and this is 100%. We're moving out of the general issue. 100% personal preference. I feel that the Foundation and the Wiki has descended from horror stuff, and it should always carry a sense of the uncanny or eerie or flat out scary. And it's, if we move too far away from that, I feel like we're moving away from our roots. That is me.
Okay. So this is huge. I want to point out that, is he pushing against other people here? Maybe, right? I mean, it's a microcosm of what he just said here. If the situation gets bad enough to where you've moved on from your roots, at some point you break the concept. And when that happens, is someone like Dr. Gears replying and saying, hey, we've moved away too far from our roots? Is that a negative thing? Is that a caustic thing? Does that make him some sort of like bad influence on the culture just because he doesn't agree with the direction that's going into? No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, it's his duty to say that, I think, because his species of thinking is becoming extinct. And at this point, he has to fight to survive. So I totally agree with him. I think that horror is, on the one hand, the format is much, much larger than horror. Most of the things that I write are not horror, right, in the classical sense. And you're really not going to have a shortage of horror articles, even now on the SCP. But yeah, it's certainly exited that category. While retaining itself as a genre, so that's a mark of its maturity, I think. But yes, I think Lord Stonefish said this best when he was talking about in his interview with Pixelated Harmony that we have on the Containment Fiction Wiki, that it's nice to have like new weird fiction basically be the more accurate nomer for the output of the site. But it really, if you don't have a governor, if you don't have voices like Dr. Gears pulling it back towards its roots, you've really lost your sense of identity. And the risk that happens with that, which we've already seen, is that you can get so isolated and abscessed as to not care about what other people, the audience is seeing, that you're becoming, as a community. Lord Stonefish was the one who said, basically it's nice that we have all these articles about like, trans, characters, trans ghosts, transitioning itself. But, at some point, there's going to be quite a large asymmetry with how much that stuff is promulgated in the community as a way of, internal celebration, and, essentially everyone else. Because let's face it, I'm sorry, the trans individuals, LGBTQ, like that's all a minority of the situation. It's an important minority, but it's a minority. And even further, there are gay people, there are trans people, there are bi people, whatever, who aren't LGBTQ, right? You understand that, right? There are people out there who don't identify with that, what is essentially a artificial political movement, right? So if you, as we've seen on the site, can't take a step back and understand that there's, an identity here, all its own, that you don't need to supplant with your own artificial political identity. Of course you're going to move away from things like horror, which happened anyway, but you move away from things more important than just which categorization you would most accurately peg the content to. You can move away from your roots in a lot of ways, not just with the categorization of it being not horror anymore.
That is me as a personal person saying that. If I ran the zoo, I'd change that. But that ain't the way it is. That's how it started. It's evolved past that. And I think that's part of the staying power, is it is sort of all things to all people, all the better.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, some of them.
Interesting.
He navigated that very diplomatically.
Okay. And how do you feel about the rating system?
He had to bring it out of him. Oh, I love it. He couldn't get away. See, this, as you know, this is what I was hoping for. Look, I'm not going to be egotistical about this, but if you can point to people talking about how shitty the rating module is of a problem in the culture and how it was really the nidus of a bacterial infection that had at that point become systemic in the culture and on the site prior to me doing it in 2019 on my author page, I'd like to see it. Not to be proven wrong, but to applaud with it, applaud it and applaud with it. I just love how it's taken, 3 years, but it's totally proliferated. It's almost like just mainstream understanding. It's just common knowledge now. I love to see that. This is why you push back, is to get results like this.
This is something I like to ask authors.
Yeah.
It's an interesting...
This is actually the only person he's asked this point blank to. He and DJ Cactus talked about it, of course, but that's DJ Cactus. That's all he talks about.
topic.
Yeah. Okay, the rating system. It's simple.
Can't live with it, can't live without it, right?
Whatever. Don't care. Here's a trick. I like watching number get bigger.
Dopamine hit, number go up technology. Why in the world would you move away from the spirituality of writing and then fixate on just the most caveman, the most cave person thing you possibly could, given the site?
I do. No, everybody does. Everybody does.
Oh yeah.
Anyone who's ever played an RPG ever, number
sure.
get bigger. It's
Oh sure. Come on, no one can argue against dopamine. You can just argue against the unmitigated inundation of it to your pleasure centers, and that be a proxy for your own ego, your own self-esteem as a writer. Sad.
Everything
You
from
like you big number.
everything from Final Fantasy to Dark Souls or whatever, number get bigger. Good.
Mm-hmm.
It's good.
Yeah.
I love seeing that. And see people that like it. I mean, I tell you what, you sit in there and you watch that number and you hit refresh about 40 times, like waiting for a microwave.
So unhealthy.
And then you see.
So unhealthy. I mean, that's what you got to do. It's in those little moments when you are. I try to avoid going to these things. I go out of my way to not get, look at ratings. I collapsed all my ratings on RPC. Every article that I have, the rating module is in a collapsible at the top of the right. Okay. So I threw you a bone there. I'd rather it not be there, but I threw you a bone. And, if you're sitting there and you find yourself refreshing the page so you can watch this thing do numbers, I mean, that's like shooting heroin up into your veins. It's like chugging, 100 proof, you know what I mean? So just stop. You got to have the discipline to stop that, because that is such a bad decision. I mean, that right, it's hard to understand, but that right there is resulting in all of the issues that you see. That's it. It's that simple. It's that small. Just stop. Stop doing that shit.
You get a downvote. It's like, well, I'm going to go shoot myself.
It's because you put so much stock. Dr. Gears understand. I'm not speaking to Dr. Gears. He understands this more than anyone. It's because you put so much stock in that. If you fall for the mental trap of putting too much stock in something like the rating as a way of telling you how good you are, you're going to feel the other side of that. The other foot is going to drop. And that's why you have such sensitive authors who cannot tolerate critique, who see a downvote and take it as a personal thing. I mean, there are literally people on the SCP Wiki who will look at everyone who voted, single out the individuals who downvoted, and if not do anything right then and there, at least, file that, put it in their back pocket for a later time, and build up this sort of bank account of animosity towards these individuals. I mean, that's how bad it is. They'll report someone who doesn't like their work and who downvotes several of their articles to the staff to try to catch them for malicious downvoting. I mean, it's insane. I've said this elsewhere. I'll say it here. When you're writing anything, but particularly if you have a social media site encroaching on your writing forum, your standards should be personal. You should be writing to a personal standard, and you should be pushing yourself to be doing a better job. You should be finding ways to make the process more difficult for you, and really your own standard should be the benchmark. It shouldn't be the rating module, although we have to live with that, right, in order to survive on the site. And then if you hit that threshold of your own personal standard, which should be higher than what anyone else's is, by the way, pushing that plus or minus button, the praise or the dislikes are just a garnish. They're just like on top. There's like the most thinnest superficial layer to something like that. So anyway, lessons learned. I love listening to Dr. Gears. We're about an hour and 30 minutes in, so we'll keep this going. I might do one more while I sit here. And thanks for joining me. We'll pick it up next time.